Thank you. Good morning. This is the time and place for the Planning Hearing Officer hearings for October 13th, 2010. My name is Laura Stotler, and I will be conducting the hearing as Planning Hearing Officer today. We have 3 cases, and relevant exhibits are posted on the panels located directly behind me. The cases today, we have a request for a conditional use permit, we have a request for a parking reduction permit, and we also have a request for standards and setback variance. Under the provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.43 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a variance shall be granted if 4 required findings are present: that the strict application of the ordinance would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance, that there are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone or neighborhood. 3, that the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. And 4, that the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. Under the provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.42 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a conditional use permit shall be granted if 4 required findings are present. They are that the proposed use will be consistent with the elements and objectives of the general plan, that the use and its associated structures and facilities will not be detrimental to the public health or safety, the general welfare, or the environment, that the use and facilities will not adversely affect or conflict with adjacent uses or impede the normal development of surrounding properties, and 4, that adequate public and private facilities, that includes utilities, landscaping, parking spaces, and traffic circulation measures, are or will be provided for the proposed use. We also have an application that involves the sale, serving, or consumption of alcoholic beverages. There are an additional 5 criteria applicable to those findings. 1, that where an existing or proposed on-site use is located in a census tract with more than the recommended maximum concentration of on-site uses, or that where an existing or proposed off-site use is located in a census tract with more than the recommended maximum concentration of off-site uses, both as recommended by the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Such use does not or will not tend to intensify or otherwise contribute to the adverse impacts on the surrounding area caused by such overconcentration. The second consideration is that where the existing or proposed use is located in a crime reporting district with a crime rate which exceeds 20% of the city average for Part 1 crimes as reported by the Glendale Police Division, that such use does not or will not tend to encourage or intensify crime within the district. 3, that the existing or proposed use does not or will not adversely impact any church, public or private school or college, daycare facility, public park, library, hospital, or residential use within the surrounding area. 4, that that adequate parking and loading facilities are or will be provided for the existing or proposed use, or other reasonable alternatives satisfy the transportation and parking needs of the existing or proposed use. And the 5th consideration is that notwithstanding the consideration of the criteria for the first 4 sections, the existing or proposed use does or will serve a public necessity or public convenience purpose for the area. And then we'll also note that applications for parking reduction permits shall also meet the procedures and criteria set forth in subsection A of section 30.32070 and table 30.32-B with qualifying project features. If the evidence presented in the application and at the hearing today meets the criteria just described, then the planning hearing officer can either approve or impose conditions for approval on the case in question. If the findings of fact are not evident, then the request will be denied. Notification of this hearing was accomplished by use of public notices, which were mailed to property owners located within 500 feet of the subject property, physically posted on the site in question and placed in the local newspaper, and also posted on the city's website. Hearings will proceed as follows. I'll read the description of the application request. Next, I'll read the reports received from other city departments and other letters or communications from interested parties. Then the case planner will make a brief overview of the case, give an analysis, and make a recommendation. The applicant will then be asked to come forward stating both name and address, and will be asked to present the case within a 15-minute time limit. And I just want to make it clear that it is the responsibility of the applicant to make all the findings that are required by the code. Others in support of or in opposition to the application and interested parties will be asked to come forward to speak, again clearly stating both name and address within a 3-minute time limit. Lastly, the applicant will be given the opportunity to make closing comments if desired in response to testimonies given by preceding speakers within a 3-minute time limit. The hearing will be closed and the case taken under submission. After the hearing, the decision will be prepared in writing and will be in the form of a letter sent to the applicants and to all persons who responded to the public notice, either by letter sent to the applicant and to all persons who responded to the public notice either by speaking at this hearing or by submitting written responses and who have provided their name and mailing address. The date of the decision will be the date appearing on the letter, not the date of the hearing. Under the provision of the appeal provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.62 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the decision may be appealed to the Planning Commission within 15 days of the decision date, and the notice of appeal shall be filed with the Building and Safety Division located in MSB 101 in this building. If you wish to speak, please write your name and address on one of the speaker's forms, which have been provided by the front door and submitted to our planning staff. I know some people came in late. This is the green forms. I would also like to inform everyone that the official proceedings of the planning hearing officer's hearings are recorded on tape as part of the public record. So we had one applicant for the first case who was coming in late, so since the other case was ready to go at the time we started the hearing, we'll take them a bit out of order. We would like to take as first case 1017 Cumberland Road. The applicant is Rodney Kahn of Kahn Consulting. The owners are Edmund and Robina Manocheri. Thanks. The case planner is Dennis Joe. This is an application for standards and setback variance to allow a 695 square foot second story addition and a legalization of a 53 square foot breezeway enclosure to be located within a 5-foot required interior setback, and to also exceed the maximum floor area ratio for the existing 2-story single-family residence at 1017 Cumberland Road, located in the R1 low-density residential zone, floor area District 1, described as Lot 7, tract number 7054. And so comments that we received from other departments. From Public Works, they've noted that the method of discharge of on-site drainage needs to be approved by the city engineer. That's a standard condition. And they're asking for drainage to be conveyed through the property to the curb. They're noting that separate permits would be required for all work in the right-of-way, and they would need to comply with the NPDES requirements for National Pollutants Discharge Elimination System. We have comments from the fire department. Actually, I take it back. This is from the water engineering section, noting that they have to comply with fire department requirements for fire flow and for domestic water services. Any water service or fire line connections need to be abandoned when no longer needed. They'll be required to have backflow prevention devices for separate irrigation and fire service connections. And it looks like no other divisions have submitted comments concerning this property other than comments that they don't have a concern. We have received a couple of communications from private parties. We have, it looks like 3 form letters, one from Sherry Horry, one from Melanie Papazian, and one from Nancy Sumner. These are all residents on Cumberland Road in the vicinity of the project site. And they all say, to whom it may concern, I believe this addition is in agreement with the existing Spanish theme of the existing house. In my opinion, this will beautify the house and increase its value. I'd like to inform the city authorities that after viewing the plans of this addition, I'm in favor of the project and in agreement with it. So you have 3 letters saying the same thing. We've also received an email. Look like this has arrived last week. And it's just a notice that we believe that the home may be a Wallace Neff design property. They don't know how that might impact the application. And they think it might be historically significant. And it doesn't say that, it doesn't appear that they're in favor or against it. They're just pointing out to our attention that they think it may be a historic structure. Okay, that concludes the comments I've received from other departments and agencies and the public. I'd like to ask the case planner to provide a presentation on the project.
Thank you, Planning Area Officer. Staff will continue its presentation about the board. I'm going to start off with the description of the existing property and its use. It is a approximately 12,000 square foot interior lot, which fronts Cumberland Road right here, and the interior property lines along the north, east, and west property lines, and to the south is Cumberland Road. It's regular in shape. It's relatively flat. However, there's a subtle incline within the front of the property facing Cumberland. It's currently developed with a two-story single-family home that's approximately 2,700 square feet, and was built with a 3-foot-7-inch interior setback along the west property line. There is a 3-car attached garage with a 0 setback, which is connected by a breezeway. The applicant had submitted some county plans that provided, at the time, I believe in the 1940s, of this breezeway existing. These county plans were presented before a building official, and they validated this would be considered a conforming breezeway being an attachment. So this would be a conforming attachment with a 0 setback with a garage. The site is approximately 1,000 feet away from the Art Even Highlands Historic District. In 2004, a historic district report was conducted in which the historic district imposed for the area. This property was identified as a potential contributing structure in the potential district. So although the area is not a historic district, it was just surveyed in a historic report for this potential application. The general plan for this property is residential low density. The zone is low density R1 zone, Floria District 1. The proposed project is a standards and setback variance, which is to allow on the first level, a 53 square foot breezeway enclosure to be legalized. Also to be built on top of this existing 3-car garage, which is attached, and over the breezeway to be legalized. In addition, on the second story, to encroach within the setback and continue the non-conforming, or the legally non-conforming 3-foot-7-inch setback. Also, this project also proposes to exceed the maximum floor area for this zone, which is 0.3. This project is exempt from CEQA, and the neighboring zones for this subject property is all R1, Floria District 1. On to staff's analysis. Staff believes there are no exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property, considering the amount of the undeveloped area at the rear of the lot. Although the lot is regular shape, relatively flat, and has a subtle upward sloping topography in the front, the physical characteristics of the property do not demonstrate any special circumstances justifying an interior setback waiver or to exceed the FAR. Although the home is approximately 80 years in existence, staff believes the project should and can be set back to reflect the privacy, light, and noise separation as addressed within the general plan and the zoning code. Staff also believes that the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance would not result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship for the project. The application is requesting to exceed the maximum FAR, but there is any absence of any difficulty or unnecessary hardship in terms of floor area ratio. The applicant has stated within the application that the addition is minimal, it's located at the rear and not visible from the street. But given the size and the relatively flat topography and the regular shape of the lot, the application has not provided any evidence why this should be granted. Staff acknowledges from a design's perspective that this is just visual, just from design's perspective. The exterior wall should be, I mean, it would make sense to continue the addition with this non-conforming 3'7" setback. However, a visual or a design is not a finding as set forth in the zoning code for a variance application. Staff believes the 3 requested waivers would be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance, as while the request is to build in line with the original non-conforming interior setback along the west property line and to exceed the maximum FAR, the application has not justified or presented any hardships or special circumstances of why the property cannot conform to current code. Per the required variance findings, a perceived hardship caused by the particular nature of the property in question must be proven and not be self-imposed. This concludes staff's analysis and presentation. I'll be available for questions, and the applicant and the homeowner are available. And that's it.
I just have a question. When you were figuring out the FAR, did you include the courtyard? Is that open, clear to the sky? Is that included in the total square footage that you were using when you calculated the size of the house versus the size of the lot? I'm just curious about the courtyard.
This white area right here?
Right.
No, that's excluded from the calculations
floor area
provided. Right.
Okay. And then the breezeway is set back at the 3'7", and the second level is also set back at 3'7". Is that correct, or is there additional setback for the second level?
The proposed breezeway enclosure to be legalized is proposed to continue the non-conforming 3'7" setback, as well as the second floor addition is proposed to be 3'7" away from the west property line.
And then the existing porte cochere, were there permits for that?
Correct.
Okay.
Building permits do reflect that porte cochere.
Okay, so that's legal non-conforming?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Thanks. First, I'd like to call up the applicant, Rodney Kahn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, staff. My name is Rodney Kahn. My offices are located at 1111 North Brand Boulevard, Suite 403, here in the city of Glendale. I'll start off by confirming the questions that you just had with Dennis. The courtyard is open all the way to the sky. We did not calculate that in our FAR. And in terms of the setback on the west side, the existing building is set back 3'7", both for the first and the second floor, as it currently is. There are a few things I'd like to highlight before I discuss the justifications and the findings related to the project. First of all, the house was constructed in 1929. And there was, as Dennis pointed out, this is a contributing structure for an adjacent historic district proposed in this area. That actually played a major role in the design of this addition that you're seeing here today. Our existing 2-story single-family house, it'll maintain the same height. It's 21 feet. The addition's taking place on the rear, as was pointed out. It's the same existing footprint, and it's by design that it was kept within that footprint. The landscaping, if you notice the picture that you're looking at that's shown, you cannot see the house. It's heavily landscaped in the front. This house is a very important house. The email said it potentially could be a Wallace Neff design. That would be great if it was, but we'd have no documentation of that. So we went back and looked through the records, and it didn't show anything like that. It just showed the contractor who built it, and it showed the property owner. So it didn't show any architect. And we have no records that says it was that. If it was that, great, because we think we've designed our addition on the rear to reflect or maintain that historic character of it. The property owner took some initiative. He came down to the city, did what he thought was his homework. He talked to the historic preservation planner, Jay Platt, and actually he had his architect, Franco Naravian, who has done a number of house additions here in the city. He had Franco come down and meet with Jay, show him the project, walk him through it, and say, is this something that you think is well done? And Jay said, absolutely. He said, this is very well done. In fact, he was supportive. He gave very favorable comments. So in the last week or two, when we've seen the staff report, and now within the same department, we have a planner that's saying, one, it was a good thing that what we were designing. Obviously, the staff is recommending against us. The owner was confused, and I said, well, don't be confused, because one department deals with historic preservation, one deals with zoning within the same department. He said, but as a citizen of Glendale, it's still confusing to me. It's the same department, isn't it? And I said, well, you need to you need to understand the way the city works, and you need to understand the way the planning division works. But you could see where this would be very confusing to a citizen of Glendale that typically doesn't go through this process. The neighborhood. What ended up happening was the property owner took his plans to the adjacent neighbors, and in particular, the one directly west, which is, if you're looking at this house addition, it's 1021 Cumberland. And I think you read one of the letters from them. Mm-hmm. Because that's the neighbor that's going to be most impacted by this addition.
That's the neighbor that also has a porte cochere that's adjacent.
Correct.
Okay, the driveway.
Correct. And so when you look at it, there was what we wanted to make sure was, when you're looking at this addition, directly to the west is the driveway of the adjacent property. So the building itself that's next door to us is set back about 12 to 14 feet from their property line. And I don't know what you're looking at there, but if you're looking at 1021
We
Cumberland.
just have a photo of the site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There should be a number of photos we provided. If not, I can dig through the file as you're listening to other speakers.
I've been out there, so
Okay.
I've seen it.
So there's a substantial existing setback from the neighbor to the west already, because that driveway is not going away. Then we have a condition where on our property, the existing house is already set back 3 foot 7 inches. And the staff mentioned aesthetically, it does make more sense to continue that existing building wall. And we agree. We're not looking at this from any perspective other than, if we maintain the integrity of the house with the addition, then that works for this property owner. If we don't, then there's no reason to do the addition, because he doesn't want to lose the character and style that currently exists. And he will walk you through and show you some photographs as well as to the detail that they've done with the house to try to maintain the integrity. Whether it's a historic, recognized historically or not, is not the point. They want to maintain the integrity of the house. Two things about the setbacks, because we have two items. One's the Floria ratio and the other's the setbacks. First of all, I already talked about the existing setback. The existing setback is 3 foot 7 inches. It's been that way for 80 plus years. That's not changing. Aesthetically, we want to continue that building line. Plus, air, light, ventilation, and everything else currently exists and will continue to exist. So that was the purpose and intent of what a setback would be for. The second is the Floria ratio standards. And if you also notice in the project and the property itself, there's a 3-car garage. There's an existing 3-car garage. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to frame it, the third parking space is a non-required parking space because the house size is under 3,500 square feet. As you know, having dealt with hillsides and having dealt with Floria ratios and having dealt with mansionization and things like that, the reason that that parking space was included was because people were building on the hillsides, or people were building in the flat areas, building large boxes or mansions and saying, well, this is just our parking area. And then the city decided, well, we're going to include, if it's non-required parking, a portion of that or all of it in the floor area ratio. Well, in this particular case, it doesn't really apply, because our 3-car garage is existing. Our 3-car garage is on the rear of the property, and it's a flat lot, and you're not going to see it. So in terms of the impact on the community or impact on what this floor area ratio standards restrictions were for, it really doesn't apply here. On top of which, and it's very odd, but Since the house size is under 3,500 square feet, we get penalized for a portion of that additional parking space. If I added more square footage to the building, then we would actually be better off. We'd have a bigger house, and we wouldn't have to include that third parking space as part of our floor area. It seems a little strange, but we kind of go with it the best we can. I don't believe that the ordinances were designed to restrict this property owner from providing this additional on-site parking, or I don't think it was the intent to try to make an older, what we're considering a historic structure, less historic. That doesn't seem logical, especially the intent and the direction the city would like to go. I know my time is limited, so I'll be as quick as I can be. As it relates to the findings themselves, the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance would result in practical difficulties. The gentleman said it would not. It would. Demolition, which we would be required to do, of the west side of the house where the existing breezeway is, would destroy the character of that Spanish colonial revival house. Once again, there was an observation done, if that's the technical term, it may not be the technical term, back in 2004, saying this house is a contributor. This breezeway has been there for 70, 80 years, for the last 50 plus, and closed. So all of a sudden, we're looking at removing characteristics or items that contributed to it being a historic structure. To me, that doesn't seem logical. The total floor area of the ratio of the house, what we tried to do, and maybe we thought we did a good job, but was proportionally lay out the house. If you look at the second-story addition on the rear, we took it back to the edge of the garage. The reason being is because aesthetically, that was the way the house laid out. We didn't have, back in the 1929s, where you had to step the building back in. So all of a sudden now, we're trying to design something that would conform with the house the way it was originally designed, and in turn, we're being encouraged not to do that, to push it in, to step it back, to do different things, and it doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. The surrounding properties in this neighborhood currently have, directly across the street from us, much larger floor area ratios. We have a house that's across the street that has a 38.5%. We are at 29.6, which, and you know the way the floor area ratios have changed over the years. At first, you had District 1, which was 30% for the entire lot, but we would have complied with that. Then it was taken the next step, saying over the, I'm trying to get this right, the first 10,000 square feet requires 30%, and then thereafter is 10%. Well, what was the purpose of doing that? The purpose of doing that was you didn't want large homes being built adjacent to smaller homes. But that's not what's taking place here. We have larger homes in the area, and honestly, this lot is much larger and can support this addition to the house. I would argue there are exceptional circumstances to the property or conditions applicable. The condition is the existing house. That's exceptional. There's nothing we can do in terms of the existing setback. If the house was set back 5 feet, we'd continue that building line 5 feet. The house is set back 3'7". Aesthetically, for purposes of maintaining the integrity of the house, it makes sense to do it at 3'7". It's already been acknowledged. The debate or the discussion is that a unique circumstance? Well, I guess that's for you to decide. But from our perspective, yes, it is. If it wasn't unique and it was just like any other house, then any other homes in the area have the necessary interior setbacks. Ours does not. I already mentioned about the proximity of the adjacent house, which is most impacted. That is the house that has sent you the letter saying they are full support of this. Obviously, there has to be some consideration given for the neighbors. If not, why would they be contacted? Why is this part of the public hearing process? The neighbors directly adjacent to it support it. If they thought that this was going to impact their property values, if they thought this was a negative thing, obviously, especially the person most impacted would not be supporting this application. They wholeheartedly support it. The granting the variance will not be materially detrimental. I just talked about why I thought it was not, but I'll also emphasize in terms of not just the neighbors, but in terms of the welfare or injurious to property in the neighborhood. it's maintaining its existing setback. That's not changing. So the large portion of the existing building is the same as it currently exists. The visibility, as it relates to the structure itself impacting the neighbors, it's not. It's not only not visible from the street, but even from the sides, it's going to maintain the integrity of the existing house. Lastly, the granting the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. I talked about what I felt was, and this could be just my opinion, but I felt, what was the objectives of the ordinance? What's the objectives of the setback ordinance? The objectives is to provide air, light, and ventilation between structures. Do we do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. In terms of the Floria ratio, what was the purpose of the Floria ratios? It was to limit the size of homes so that they were compatible. They were not incompatible with the adjacent neighbors. Obviously, we feel we're not incompatible. We are very much compatible, and our adjacent neighbors feel we are compatible. Anyway, I'll conclude my comments. You do have copies of the letter. You already read it, so I'm not going to read it. In terms of the adjacent neighbors, support the neighbors on each side, the neighbor across the street. These are the people that are going to be living with this addition and living with this house and living with the property owner. And he's done an excellent job of keeping the house in good shape, maintaining this beautiful home, and we'd like to continue to do that. I'll conclude my remarks. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, no, we don't have any at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks. The next, I'd like to call up, we have the architect has come. Could I call up Franco Naravian?
Morning. My name is Franco Naravian. I'm the architect on the project. 409 West Broadway, Glendale, California, 91204 is the address. I just wanted to say that I met with Jay Platt a couple of times because my first thought was I didn't want to do anything to take away from the historical value of the existing house. So I met with him a couple of times, and he was in support of the project. He felt that what we were doing is not, it keeps with the integrity of the existing house, and it doesn't look like an addition. And then later on, I did have another conversation with him when he said he still, after we had submitted our plans, he still believes that, he supports the project. It's just that he cannot say that this is the only way that this can be done. Therefore, he can't support a variance because it's a good design. Basically, that's what he was saying. But he does support the project.
Okay.
And if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
So when you designed it, you were cognizant of the historic value the house may have when you designed the addition?
Absolutely. And we're trying to, and I think Jay will agree that it's still, the addition doesn't take away from the historic value of the existing house.
Did you look at any options to design it that would have a setback on the second floor that would meet the interior requirements?
If we do that, it will, in my opinion anyways, because we're not continuing an existing wall and we're pushing it back, it would look like an addition. Now, I did talk about that exact issue with Jay, and he said yes, he agrees. It will look, but the only neighbor that will see it is that one neighbor. So again, he agrees that it would look like an addition if we pushed it in, but he still couldn't support our variance argument because he feels like, well, that's only one neighbor. It's in the back, and it's not important enough to justify getting a variance for that. But I think anyone would agree that if we push the wall in and it's not a continuous wall, it will look like an addition.
Okay. And did you look at doing any additions that would meet the FAR, or it just wasn't possible?
Now that is, see, the problem is either you do no addition at all because you don't go over the garage, or once you go over the garage, you can't go over one bay. It's a 3-bay garage, and I did look at alternatives, but they don't look as good as the one where we go all the way over the garage. It just looks like it always was meant to be that way.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't have any questions. Anything else you'd like to add? Or?
No, that's it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Then the last speaker I have is Phillip Keller. I know we had some people coming in. If anybody would like to speak on 1017 Cumberland Road, now is the time to submit a speaker's form. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Phillip Keller. I'm a representative from the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. And before I start into my comments, I just want to say that I think this is really a beautiful property and been by it many times, and I think the owners have done a wonderful job in maintaining it. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and they're expressing a great concern and sentiment to design the project to fit and conform with the architectural style of the original portion of the house. So that's not lost on us at all. But my comments today are addressing the issue of the variance. Being a homeowners association, we sort of do our diligence, and we come here to represent the concerns of all of our homeowner members. And the two areas of setbacks and maximum FARs are a major issue that we deal with all the time. I think, as clearly stated in the staff report, it identifies that it hasn't met all four of the required findings, and that it doesn't demonstrate an exceptional need or hardship to warrant the granting of this variance. We feel that these core standards of setbacks and FARs greatly help to ensure that all additions and remodels in our beautiful neighborhoods, especially Northwest Glendale, where our association is, continue to make these neighborhoods compatible. We would really urge the applicant to go back and look at limiting that garage addition to 519 square feet, which would put it right at the FAR threshold. And I completely understand. I'm a designer myself in the film business, and I've done some architecture. Franco's point of extending it, and I agree that's probably the best aesthetic way, just as an envelope of looking at the design of the addition over. But I think there are other ways to still achieve designs that are close to that can be almost as good. Slanted roof, buttresses, other Spanish Revival details that he's well aware of. I would encourage them to look at that and resubmit. That's really only our main issue with it, is meeting the standards of the city code of FAR and setbacks. As far as the wall setback on the side, I agree that bringing it along parallel with the existing part is the true architectural way to do it, to make it look original. And that also the neighbor on the other side is the only one who's going to be strongly impacted. But if you look at the reverse of that, if they did step it in to meet the code enforcement of the proper setback, again, really that neighbor's the only one who's going to really see that backside pushed in. So I think there are a couple ways to look at this and still keep the wonderful architecture and the detail and the great design and the lengths that they've gone to, obviously, to maintain the character of the home. So that's our concern with it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Oh. Thank you. Edmund Manucheri? Manucheri.
Good morning. My name is Edmund Manucheri. I reside at 1017 Cumberland Road, Glendale, California. I would like to explain some of the non-technical aspects of this project from an occupant's point of view. Rodney presented the technical aspects of it. We purchased this house in September 1 of 2003. Over a period of many years, we have tried to maintain it as best as we could, keeping the integrity, the history, and the style of the house the same way that we got it. We are preservationists. We're not mansionizers. All we are asking here is to get some accommodations to accommodate my family of 4 with some comfort and a couple of extra bedrooms since my kids are growing up. The addition expands over all 3 garages, garage spaces, to give the design some harmony and symmetry. We would like to add these bedrooms as if they were done in the first place. So, as they mentioned, we would like to show as if it has been there since the 1920s. I was surprised to hear this morning that maybe this is a Wallace Neff or a compatible design to it. To my knowledge, if we did the setback at 5 feet, personally, I would think that it would simply take it away from a Wallace-Neff design. If it were a Wallace-Neff design, then all the setbacks should have been 3.7 or something like that. But we would have to go back to 5 feet. And personally, I would not even go ahead with the project because it would just take away from the beauty that we want to add to this project. That's all I have to say.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Seeing nobody else, I'd like to call up the applicant for rebuttal.
Good morning again. My name is Rodney Kahn. It's not really a rebuttal, but I'll speak. Obviously, this has to do with maintaining the integrity of the house. And I guess there's two perspectives. One is the code. And the one gentleman who spoke from the Homeowners Association spoke, and I agree with his comments as it relates to continuing the setback. Everybody thinks that makes the most sense. From a historic perspective, that's one aspect of this project, which is, for us, the main aspect. The second aspect as it relates to, well, just meet the code. Even though only one neighbor will see it, it'll change the integrity of the house, but just meet the code. Well, I think that's not their proper approach to go on, is to say just meet the code. I don't think it's important. You have to look at what the intent of the code is. What's the purpose for the code? Not just that the code has it written down. We looked at it and said, what makes the most sense for this property, for this project, for the historic integrity of this property? And so, at some way, and I don't want to pit historic aspects against the code aspects, but from some perspectives, you have that. Because everybody agrees it makes more sense just to continue that building wall, except for the code. The second thing as it relates to floor area ratio, absolutely, you ask Franco the right questions. Did you look at other alternatives? Yes. No one comes in, or at least we didn't, come in and say, this is it, this is the only thing we can do, you got to accept it. Well, obviously we don't do that. He looked at some different perspectives, he looks at some different ideas. It didn't work. Could he go back and look at some others? Absolutely. But if it doesn't work, and if it doesn't aesthetically meet what the owner is trying to do by maintaining the integrity of the structure, then he could look at 50 different ways. And if it's not going to be built, it's just lines on a paper. It doesn't make sense. So I think that, if anything, in closing, I could suggest is, if you have the opportunity, and maybe you already have, to come out to look at the structure, I think that would be very, very beneficial. If Franco comes up with some other alternatives and designs, and the owner can live with them, that's great. That's great. But so far, we tried to do that before we submitted our application, not after. So anyway, if you can take into consideration what we've said here today, and then we hope that you could look at approving this. If you can, we would greatly appreciate it. And I'll conclude my remarks on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Is there anybody else, this is last chance, anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing no one, then I will take this item under consideration. Or submission, I guess it's the technical term. Thanks. Okay, for the next case, 6410 San Fernando Road. I see a couple people in the audience, but I only have one speaker's card, so if there's anybody else who would like to speak, now is the time to turn in a speaker's request form. This is a conditional use permit case number PCUP 2010-006 for Ambrosia Restaurant. It's continued from October 6, 2010. The applicant was Levick Beninian. Owners Vahe Vahe Alex and Azatui Yapundijian. The project description is its applicant is proposing a change of use from a full-service restaurant to a banquet hall, offering the on-site sales, service, and consumption of all types of alcoholic beverages, and not providing the required number of parking spaces in the C3 commercial service zone located at 610 San Fernando Road, described as portion of Lot 5, Block 108, Rancho Providencia, and Scott Tract. Part of this project also includes a parking reduction permit, case number PPR 2010-004. And we'll be taking these two items in one hearing, so instead of having two, we'll just combine them if that's all right with everybody. Looks like I see agreement in the audience. And then there's also an existing EIF that was adopted for this project. So just make note of that. Okay, for comments received, from our traffic engineers, it notes that there's a deficiency in on-site parking that could encourage project parking to occur in adjacent residential neighborhoods on residential streets such as Roberta and Sonora Avenues. It's noted that a parking occupancy survey of the area's on-street parking within 300 feet of the project site would determine if the 16-space parking deficiency could be mitigated with on-street parking. Surveys on Friday evenings, Saturday afternoon and evenings, and Sunday afternoon and evenings. It says the time periods when the banquet hall would be most heavily utilized would address that issue. And then there's an email from Thursday, July 29th, talking about the proposed banquet hall, impact of code-based 16-space parking deficiency. It says the existing restaurant site at 6410 San Fernando Road contains 38 on-site parking spaces. If formally converted to a banquet hall, the facility would require 54 parking spaces. And because no additional parking space is either on or off-site or proposed, there would be a deficiency in parking spaces of 16 spaces based on the city code. And then there was also a summary of a letter that was sent to There was a summary of a letter to Mr. was a summary of a letter from Derek Tabone, Esquire, dated July 26, 2010. It says a parking occupancy survey of the existing restaurant facility was conducted by Mr. Tabone on a Saturday, July 17th, between 7:30 and 8:30. Facility accommodated a private party, a wedding reception attended by 200 guests approximately, and they were families at the time of the survey. Of the 200 guests, approximately 90% that reached approximately 90% of the maximum permitted capacity of 220 persons at the facility. It says Mr. Tabone estimates 50 to 55 vehicles transported 200 guests to the facility, and no valet parking service was provided at that event. And it says based upon the survey information provided by Mr. Tabone, the average vehicle occupancy for guests was approximately 3.6 to 4 persons per vehicle. Though it notes, considering that many families were in attendance, this vehicle occupancy appears reasonable. However, it should be noted that vehicle occupancies of 2.5 to 3 persons per vehicle are typically encountered at banquet halls, especially when the events are attended primarily by adult couples. And in order to mitigate any potentially adverse impacts of the 16-space parking deficiency, valet parking should be considered, in which the entire valet operation occurs on-site, drop-off, parking, pickup. And it says because these 16 parking spaces could involve as many as approximately 65 guests, assuming 4 persons per vehicle, and moreover, the banquet hall has a maximum capacity of 220 persons, the valet service should be provided when events with approximately 155 or more guests are scheduled. So that was a note from a traffic and transportation engineers. From From Neighborhood Services, they've noted that there is an existing code enforcement case on the property for operating of a business without a required conditional use permit. The current CUP is for a full-service restaurant. However, the facility is primarily being used as a banquet hall. The granting of this request would remedy that violation. It says Neighborhood Services has also added the violation of an illegal exterior enclosure under the stairs in the rear to the existing code enforcement case in accordance with PCUP 2007-034, which allowed the service of alcoholic beverages at full-service restaurant. Condition number 31 required that the enclosure at the northeast corner of the building should be removed. This condition should be met prior to any entitlement approval. Otherwise, the CUP allowing alcohol service and sales should be revoked. Public Works Engineering has noted that the method of discharge needs to comply with NPDES requirements, and that would be from all roof and on-site drainage. The existing public payphone and its pedestal located in the sidewalk shall be removed from the public right-of-way. Separate permits are required for all work within the public right-of-way. Applicants shall bear all fees for the necessary permits and construction for work within the public right-of-way. The fire department has noted that the existing facility has outstanding fire code violations that must be corrected prior to consideration of requested continuation of use. And they provided an attached letter dated July 19th, 2010 to Vahe Alex Yapun Dijian, Ambrosia Restaurant and Catering, at the same address as this case. Says that they have to add fire sprinkler coverage to the storage area outside and stairwells and relocate the pendant fire sprinkler next to the kitchen hood. Says obtain licensed sprinkler contractor to perform the work and obtain necessary permits from the city. It says install panic hardware on all exit dining doors and remove illegal locking devices. It says have a licensed hood extinguisher contractor do an analysis of the hood extinguishing system in place to determine if coverage of all appliances is adequate. It says all work needs to be done under a permit, and they need to also determine if the present extinguishing media will handle a charcoal fire grill. And they also say they provide 1 hour separation between the water heater and rated exit corridor. So that's a ongoing fire department violation. Also, it should be noted that when it talks about coverage of the storage area outside the stairwells, that storage area, we also see that it was required to be removed under a previous conditional use permit requirement. That wasn't the fire department's requirement. I'm just noting that because it is on an existing approval on the site. From the police department, we have comments. They're just noting that the property owner and the applicants are in the process of obtaining a conditional use permit to allow the change of use from a full-service restaurant to a banquet hall. They've also noted that there is a request for a parking reduction permit in association with this change of use. And they've noted presently there are 37 on-site parking spaces. As proposed, the change of use would result in a shortfall of 16. And they've noted that Ambrosia Restaurant is located in Census Tract 3016.01, which allows for 6 on-sale establishments. There are currently 5 on-sale establishments within this tract. Based on Part 1's crime statistics for Census Tract 3016.01, in 2009 there were 89 crimes, which is 7% above the citywide crime average of 84. It says within the last calendar year there were 2 calls for police service at the location. On September 2nd, 2009, there was a theft report, and on April 16th, 2010, there was a person not breathing call. And the Ambrosia Restaurant does have an active Type 47 liquor license. That's on sale general eating place. And they have noted that they have some recommendations for conditions. I won't go into detail on, but one of them is related to music, lighting, or other sound that you can't be audible off-site or disturb off-site occupancies or businesses or on the public right-of-way. Noise shall be contained to the site. All music, lighting, noise, and odors shall be confined to the occupancy to not disturb occupants of other businesses or properties and patrons on the public right-of-way. Applicant shall monitor area under its control in an effort to prevent loitering of persons about the premises. Applicant shall not permit any public nuisance at the premise or adjacent areas outside the premises, including the alley and parking areas. The applicant and management staff and employees are strictly responsible for security on site and for preventing criminal activity, including but not limited to fights, disturbances, alcohol laws, assaults, public drunkenness, narcotic use, and or sales of narcotics and drunk driving by patrons leaving the premises. For live entertainment, there's conditions for what type of live entertainment would not be allowed. And that's the comments we've received from police. And we don't have comments from other departments. It looks like we did receive an email. We have 2 emails. Looks like one came in from Walt Robertson. He says he's just heard this plan to convert the restaurant into question into a banquet hall regardless of the lack of parking in the neighborhood. He's saying there's already too many multifamily residential units and commercial enterprises impacting the neighborhood. There's not enough parking for the number of people that are currently in the area. It says this corner is congested and parked up to the hilt. He says that says they drive blocks out of their way to avoid the intersection from 6 to 8 p.m. on weekdays. They said that they disagree with putting parking in the alleyway and in the parking lot. They said guests are going to be frustrated with parking. Blocks away to get to the venue are likely to park illegally in lots of neighboring businesses. And again, they're talking about how narrow the alleyway is for the access for all the parking that they feel is going to be required. They also note that an at-grade train crossing is just half a block away, and that's not an intersection that can afford to get gridlocked. So that's one of the neighbors. We also have an email from Joanne Hedge. She says, speaking as a longtime homeowner, and not necessarily on behalf of an HOA, she's voicing concerns about the proposed transition from a restaurant status to a banquet hall with a 16 parking space shortfall. And she's concerned that it'll impact her nearby Rancho neighborhoods and other residential areas in the area. And she's concerned with the parking at Bank of America. She says they have a shortage of commercial parking in the area, especially at the bank. And the side streets are largely multifamily dwellings separated from the restaurant by a small alley. And is concerned with noise, crowds, late hour parking, traffic issues in the area. And so basically she's talking about impacts for noise, pollution, traffic, shortage of parking. And that was her letter. It was an email. It came in October 5th. And then we have an email that came in from Carolyn West. She's also resides in the neighborhood, and she has similar concerns. Her main concerns are traffic and parking. And again, she's not in favor of approving a business with a significant parking deficiency. And she's concerned with traffic gridlock. And that concludes all the comments we've received. I'd like to ask the case planner to provide an overview of the project.
Thank you, Planning Hearing Officer Stotler. As you indicated, this is a change of use from a full-service restaurant to a banquet hall offering the on-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages and not providing the required number of parking spaces. There is a proposed negative declaration on file, PEIF 2010-009. And there's also an existing conditional use permit, PCUP 2007-034, which was granted back in 2008, September 30th to be specific. And the applicant is proposing to amend this existing entitlement, obviously with this new proposal. Property is located in C3 Commercial Zone, Height District 1. The location is on the north side of San Fernando Road between Roberta Avenue and Sonora. It is a one-story in height building, but it has an existing mezzanine. And the total square footage is 9,470 square feet. Presently, the site actually contains 37 striped parking spaces. However, if you notice in the report, we use the number 38, and that's because city's records indicate that there are 38 spaces on site, and that was actually an issue that was raised and was brought to the applicant's attention. And so what they've done is in their recently submitted or most recent version of their site plan, it includes 38 spaces, including a new angled parking space and relocation of a handicap stall, because the existing that's on the site abutting the alley would not conform to ADA requirements. Ultimately, they would have to get a building permit to restripe according to their proposal. I'm not going to go over the comments from the police department, because basically you've already discussed those, as well as neighborhood services and fire comments that were raised. In terms of the analysis, as I indicated earlier, they are proposing a full-service restaurant. There is an existing code enforcement case which involves the operation of the business because they're operating banquets without the required conditional use permit, and therefore, which means that they're exceeding the 30% of serving area of a full-service restaurant. So therefore, because they're operating in this way, they are in violation of the zoning code. That's why they have a code enforcement case, and that's why the applicant is here today to try to remedy the situation. In addition, they will be providing the sales and service of and consumption of alcoholic beverages, ancillary to the serving of food during their banquet facilities. And of course, due to the change of use, they have a parking deficiency, and I will discuss that further in the analysis for the parking reduction. There are residential developments located north of the site, and for that reason we took that into account, because obviously they could potentially be impacted. And in the past, private banquets have been held at the facility. During their unauthorized operation, no calls for police or complaints to neighborhood services were reported, which would indicate that the proposed banquet hall use would adversely impact the surrounding uses, including these residential multifamily buildings north of the site. And in addition to that, in the environmental study or initial study that was prepared, what was analyzed was also the potential environmental impacts associated specifically with noise. And again, it indicates that noise resulting from banquet hall use, and that would be, for example, increase in traffic and guests, is not expected to impact surrounding uses. And of course, the service of alcoholic beverage will continue to be accessory to the primary banquet hall use. Section 30.64020 of the Glendale Municipal Code provides for continuing jurisdiction over the use so that any adverse effect resulting from the use will not be continued. And in addition to that, as previously stated, no evidence has been presented by the police or neighborhood services that would indicate otherwise, that in this case that the banquet hall use and their entitlement requests, in addition to the obviously the occasional private parties, would impact the surrounding uses. And finally, Again, I'm not going to go into further detail as it relates to where this property is located in terms of the census tract, but as noted in the police comments, they are in Part 1 crime statistics for Census Tract 2009, where it shows that there were 89 crimes, 7% above the citywide average of 84. However, this particular facility, there were only 2 calls for service, and you noted them earlier that it was only for a theft and a person not breathing. So again, we don't have any records showing that it had to due to the unauthorized operation of private or in this case, banquet-type parties. And in terms of the analysis for the parking reduction permit, the building is 9,470 square feet, and that's what's noted in the report. As previously indicated, there are 38 on-site parking spaces, and the reason why there's fewer than required is because the property carries grandfathered rights, which is termed legal nonconforming in our zoning code. The previous full-service restaurant required 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor area, whereas a banquet hall requires 28.6 spaces for seating area. And as shown on the floor plan, a 60-foot width by 65-foot length seating area is shown, which equals to 3,900 square feet. So based on that seating area that is identified and dimensioned in the floor plan, the proposed banquet hall would require 111 parking spaces, and they get, based on the previous use, it would require 95, based on the 10 per thousand requirement. So when you take these two into account and you do the math, you end up with a shortage of 16 spaces. And therefore, a parking reduction is being requested for that 16 space deficiency. As you indicated earlier, and you read through, and I won't summarize it in detail, but there was an analysis that was prepared, or in this case, a parking situation, or in this case, rather, in order to assess the parking situation, the applicant submitted a parking survey. That was the term I wanted to use. And it was performed during when the actual banquet was hosting a private party, in this case, a wedding reception, which approximately 200 guests were in attendance. The details are in the report. However, the Traffic and Transportation Administrator further analyzed this document and concluded that in order to mitigate any potential adverse impacts of the 16 parking space deficiency, and that would, for example, guests parking on nearby residential streets or in off-street parking lots without the required authorization, he concluded that valet parking should be considered, in which the entire valet operation occurs on-site for the drop-off, parking, and pickup. And because these 16 parking spaces could involve as much as approximately, let's say, 65 guests, assuming 4 persons per vehicle, the banquet hall has a maximum capacity of 220 persons. So therefore, the valet service should be provided when events with approximately 155 or more guests are scheduled. And that is why a condition was included in the report, or is one of the recommended conditions of approval, to ensure compliance and to address the potential impacts that this may have if a valet service were not provided. So in conclusion, based on the information that I've discussed in the analysis and information provided by the applicant, staff believes that the findings for both the conditional use permit and the parking reduction could be made in a positive manner. I will not go into the findings or draft findings that staff prepared. However, I do want to highlight, as you indicated earlier, some conditions of approval noted in both entitlements, and they have to do with the previous conditional use permit, which is actually currently active, that was required, and that is shown as condition number 8 and 9 and 10 in the parking reduction conditions of approval, and it's also, again, included in the conditions of approval for the CUP, that the 6408 address shall be removed from the front building prior to the issuance of a zoning use certificate, and that the landscaping area to the northwest of the site of the trash area enclosure shall be restored with live plant material, and that the enclosure at the northeast corner of the building shall be removed as well. And again, that is a code enforcement issue. These items were required originally when the existing CUP was granted by the City Council.
So that would be, they were required to do these things on September 30th, 2008?
That is correct.
And then
I think they had a period of 6 months, if I recall. But I don't remember offhand because I don't have the record of decision in front of me.
But there was a time limit in which they needed to perform that?
If I recall, I think it was 6 months. But again,
Okay, so we're 2 years later.
these items have, to my knowledge, when I performed several site visits during the process, when the application was submitted, and during the process when I was preparing the staff report, to the last minute before finalizing my report, I wanted to verify on these occasions if these items were addressed, and per my site visits, they were not.
Yeah, it looks like, according to the previous CUP, or actually the existing CUP, 2007-034, Condition 28, that the enclosure at the northwest corner of the building shall be removed within 60 days, so it appears that
Oh, 60 days.
60
Okay.
days, at least that one violation.
Okay.
I don't see a time limit. Oh, there is a time limit, and also another 60 days for condition
Okay.
number 24 to replace the
Okay.
live plant material.
Okay, so it's 60 days.
60
I
days.
got it confused
Yeah.
with the number 6. Instead of 6 months, it was 60 days.
Okay, so basically, either way, we're looking at 2 years that
Right.
they've known this. Okay.
So again, we're emphasizing it this time, again. And we wanted to, again, bring that to your attention. Because again, it's also a code enforcement violation. With that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Okay, thanks. Then I have only one card. Actually, I do have before I call up, I guess this is their attorney for the applicant. Before I call up the attorney for the applicant, I do have a question for you. When you went out to the site, did you notice any other activities going on besides a banquet hall on the property or restaurant use?
Well, the times that I went was a weekday.
Okay.
So it was either, and it wasn't a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when typically banquet activities would probably be conducted. So I did not personally notice any type of activity as it relates to a party or an event of that nature. The only activity that I saw, obviously, was the fact that there were customers for the bank, at the Bank of America, that were parking in their designated spaces behind the alley. And they actually have signs posted that parking is for B of A customers only, and I believe that any unauthorized parking that's not for that specific use can be towed, if I recall. I don't remember the exact language. And the other interesting thing that I noticed was the adjacent use to the, I would assume it would be the east or the north. It's one of the adjacent uses closer to Roberta Avenue. There was a sign posted in the alley, and it said, "No parking for Ambrosia customers." And that was kind of interesting to see, especially on a weekday, when a banquet facility would not be hosting or conducting private parties.
Okay.
So those were the only items that I noted, and in addition to seeing employees at the Ambrosia facility cooking.
Okay. And I did have a question about the site plan, and maybe you'd be able to answer it, maybe it's the applicant. It looked like there, at least on one of the site plans that was submitted, there was an adjacent use, and at one of the old plans in there showed that it was some sort of a sandwich shop, and now it appears perhaps it's part of the building. Do you know if it's all part of the same structure? I'm talking about the area in here. Like it was, San Fernando, it would be in this area here.
Right, this is, I believe this is where that 6408 address is identified. And that's where I actually saw, and I actually had a conversation, very, very brief, when I was asking those employees that were there if that was part of Ambrosia, because I noticed they were cooking, and I noticed pots and pans and what have you. And according to what I was told, they mentioned that they were all part of the same business, Ambrosia, and they were cooking for, I'm assuming they were catering for one of their parties, because that's what I heard in the midst of the conversation.
So for the parking use permit, or the parking reduction permit, we're talking about the entire
Exactly.
building. There's not a portion of the building that's a different use that also might have a separate parking requirement, correct? That would also use that 16 or the 38, 37 spaces. Right. Okay. Thanks. I'd like to call forward Mr. Derek Tabone, attorney for the applicant. Hi.
My name's Derek Tabone. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My office is in Van Nuys. Let me start by talking a little about the history of the place and how it got to you here. I think the building went in the 50s or 40s, and it went in as a retail store. It had been a hardware store, it had been an appliance store, it had been something else, a sporting goods shop, a gun store. And in about 1993, it was started being converted to restaurant use. By 1996, it got a permit to convert the entire building, which was both the 6410 and the 6408, into one large restaurant. I think that opened in 97, 96. It went in as a purpose-built banquet hall. That was what it was. That's what it was modified to. That's the only reason you use 3,000 square feet out of 9,000 square foot building for seating area. The rest of the area is kitchen. There's entry halls. There's huge bathrooms. There's dressing areas for brides. There's the things that you want for a banquet hall. And the entire upstairs is used for storage and office space. It's never been used as part of the restaurant. And it has operated consistently and continuously since 1996 as a banquet hall. It was never anything else. That was, up before 2002, that was a permitted use, as full-service restaurants could be banquet halls or vice versa. They had a CUP or certificate of occupancy, depending on the year, for a restaurant and operated as a banquet hall. They'd occasionally have some lunch trade. They did some takeout, but it was mostly a banquet hall business. The city they applied for it and obtained a conditional use permit for alcohol sales, Type 47 liquor license. It is that license or that permit that has been conditioned. There's no condition on the building saying you can't be a banquet hall. What the city did was condition the conditional use permit for alcohol sales and started putting no banquet hall restrictions in there in 2004, 2005. Those conditions were neither noticed by the applicant or the operator nor enforced by the city until the most recent one in 2007, when the city used the conditional use permit for alcohol to outright ban the pre-existing banquet hall use. That went through the whole hearing process with the city. It went through the court process and is now on appeal because it has been the applicant or owner's contention that you can't use a conditional use permit for a non-related sub-object like alcohol sales to extinguish a grandfathered right, and they have been operating continuously since 1996 as a banquet hall. In the Court of Appeal, we reached a resolution with the City of Glendale through Ann Maurer to settle the matter by applying for a conditional use permit for banquet hall. This is a C3, it's a conditional use. At the same time, we were told we would need a conditional use permit or a parking reduction permit because of the shortfall of spaces, and there would have to be a modification of the conditional use permit for alcohol at the same time to wrap it up in a package. But it's not a new use. It is not to change a use. It is to continue the use that has been in existence since 1996 and to settle litigation. That's how we got where we are. Let's talk about the parking for a second. I'm the one who actually did the parking survey. I went out on a night when they had one of their larger events and actually watched people come in. I didn't know this until I got out there. The way Armenian wedding receptions work is that the wedding is at one time of the day and the reception is usually several hours later. The bridal party gets there first and the guests arrive later. Usually they go home and change and come back. So the bridal party was there, and I watched the guests arrive over the next hour until they basically filled the hall up. Even when I left, there were 3 or 4 spaces left in the parking lot for use by the patrons they didn't use. They should have had a valet that night. In fact, they normally have one for anything over about 100 people. They normally have a valet. The valet didn't appear that night, and there still was no parking problem. The people that didn't park in the 38 spaces for the building either parked in the street in front in San Fernando Road or parked in the B of A's lot behind it. When I got there before the guests arrived, there were already people parked in the Bank of America lot, and those were tenants or guest tenants, I guess, in the adjacent apartment buildings. You can tell that because they were parked closest to the corners where you could walk to the apartment buildings and furthest away from Ambrosia, which would be the center of the lot. And even when I left, that lot was not full. And B of A apparently over the last 15 years has never roped the lot off or towed a single car from it, whether it's people from Ambrosia, people from the next door Thai restaurant. For that matter, the use adjacent or immediately adjacent, I think, to the east is a sausage shop, Continental Sausage. They have 1 parking space or 2 parking spaces, and one of those is filled up with a trailer. They park there full time. They use as a refrigerator. They park a semi there with a refrigeration unit on it and use that as an outdoor refrigerator. They don't have any parking at all, so their people must park in either Ambrosia's lot in the daytime or they park in B of A's lot, and they've never had a problem. During the entire time I was there, nobody was parking on Sonora or Roberta because it's simply too far to walk. It'd be much closer just to park on San Fernando right in front of the building. And there were spaces there when I left. Well, parking has never been a problem for this facility, and I suspect the reason why is because most of the events it hosts are family events, weddings, birthdays, that type of thing, bar mitzvahs. And families come to them, and they usually come in, as I said, about 4 per vehicle. Some vehicles, such as SUVs, hold 6 or 8 people. So that even offsetting the couples, I estimated for the 200 people that were in attendance that one night, there were probably no more than 55 cars. So there may have been as many as 15 to 20 parked either in B of A's lot or around the street, but even that didn't fill up either Bank of America's lot or the street parking immediately in front of the building. On the other side from the sausage place is a Thai restaurant and has a sign, and the sign is there all the time. It says, "Please no Ambrosia parking." The Ambrosia people respect that, and they don't park there, which is why that person hasn't seemed to have any problem with this application. I've read through the conditions. We have no problem with the hours. Actually, have no problem with having a valet there at 155 people or proposed guests or more. I want to talk a little bit about what happened with the enclosure and other subject that Milka brought up, which is the restoring part of the landscaping. When my client took over the building, the spaces underneath the stairs, there's 3 staircases to the second floor spaces. People were sleeping under them. The city asked him to stop the people sleeping under them. He did that by enclosing them so people couldn't sleep under them. The city's now asked him now to pull out the enclosures, and one of the other requirements is to sprinkler the enclosure, which makes no sense. One of the enclosures is used, and what they did is they took the space underneath the stairs and a balcony was on top, and they put a metal enclosure on it. They put metal uprights, they put hard metal grating, small grade, painted it to match the metalwork in the building. It's all custom done. It's actually a very nice job. Keeps people from sleeping under there. That's the one that's at the northeast corner of the building, and they use it for storage of non-perishables, bottled water, canned food. I guess there's charcoal in there, something like that. That's the one that Milk's talking about removing. The other one is the two garbage dumpsters for this business are at the northwest corner of the lot. They had one when they opened. Apparently there was a plan submitted back years ago that indicated they were going to have landscaping there. They never put landscaping in there. It's never had landscaping. Other landscaping was placed in, but that was never used for landscaping. The reason why is it turned out that you can't get garbage pickup on weekends, and if there's only one dumpster, there's not enough space for all the garbage the place generates over a 3-day weekend if they have events. Therefore, they have 2 dumpsters to keep the garbage off the ground. I talked about this extensively with Ann Maurer. We were supposed to meet out there someplace along this process, discuss this and resolve it. She never could quite get there at the time I could get there, so we never discussed it, but that's why it hasn't been resolved since 2008. And that's why we would prefer those conditions not be there. We don't want to have garbage on the ground because over a long weekend, the facility can generate more garbage than one dumpster can handle, and you can't get garbage pickup on weekends, particularly holiday weekends. The other thing I wanted to let you know is what the building is actually used for. What was 6408 and the sandwich shop is now all kitchen. The kitchen's extensive, not only can handle the 200 or so guests can fill the banquet hall, but they also do a takeout business, and they do delivery food to adult daycare centers and convalescent homes and that type of thing. They do a substantial amount of commercial cooking from the facility in addition to what they do for the banquet hall, which is why even on weekdays there's people there. They're cooking for other local businesses that need catering services, which is how the business is surviving in a rather bad economy because banquet hall use is way down. But that's how they generate that much garbage, so they need the 2 dumpsters. The other areas, they put the only real greenery on the back side of those buildings was put in by Ambrosia, and that's an area that's got plants in it and trees and some bushes.
Is that in the
Separate-
parking strip?
Yeah. That was placed in. That's what they did do, and there's some plants up against the building as well. I don't know if you can see them very well.
The ones in the pots?
Yeah, there's plants in the pots. Plants along here, and this is the green area, parking spaces. These, by the way, these wouldn't be Ambrosia people. Ambrosia people who park on this side. These are some of their business are probably from samples. There are a couple of plants at the this Thai restaurant. A couple of potted plants there, and I don't think there's any greenery except maybe one potted palm tree. This is a this because I went out there. The enclosure we're talking about is
Okay.
it's actually this right here. There's a balcony overhanging from the top, and what there's something that closed at the bottom with metal to match the building style.
Okay, so I'm just to make sure that the TV picks it up, I'm going to repeat what you said.
Oh,
That
yeah.
one area you just pointed out is where the storage area is.
That's the storage area, yes. And that's the area that I think that's the area that they want.
That's correct.
Saying yes, and that's they enclosed that originally because the city said there are people sleeping here, so they enclosed all the areas. There's 3 sets of stairs, and they enclosed underneath all of them with some type of metalwork and gates, so people wouldn't sleep there anymore. And they decided to use it because of the amount of cooking they're doing. It'd be better to have some of the things kept outside the kitchen than inside that are non-perishable. So if you'd look at those, or we can discuss those. Like I said, I was supposed to meet with Ann Maurer to discuss those 2 conditions in particular, and we never seem to have made the arrangement. In terms of the findings, this is I think all the findings we made, I think the staff has concurred that basically the findings can be made that the proposed use will be consistent with the various elements and objectives of the general plan. This area was industrial or light industrial. It is gradually turning to retail and commercial, which I think is what the city's general plan has in mind, because across the street, if you look, there are body shops and paint shops and that type of thing, and it is gradually turning to more of a commercial area. but it is not going to be like the other parts of San Fernando that are heavily commercial restaurant grow. This is never going to be that kind of area, at least not in the near future. So it's certainly consistent, turning it from from one form of retail to a restaurant is certainly within the city's general plan. There's no detrimental use to the public in terms of public health or safety, welfare, or environment. This business has been operating in its current format for 15 years or 14 years now. And in fact, in all that time, there's never been a parking problem and there's never been a crime problem. The use in facilities will not affect or adversely affect or conflict with adjacent uses. No, none of the adjacent use people have ever appeared to object in any of the hearings to the current use of the subject property. And there are adequate public and private facilities such as utilities, obviously. This is a fully developed area. Street access. San Fernando Road, particularly at night and on weekends when this facility is most heavily used, doesn't have a lot of traffic. This is, like I said, it's not a residential area. It's not a commercial area. It's more light industrial changing to commercial. So there's not a lot of traffic on either San Fernando or side streets, Sonora and Roberta. There's apartment buildings. But you can get down from Sonora to the freeway pretty quickly, and I guess there's an on-ramp on Western. So 50 or 60 cars for an event coming at 8 o'clock and leaving at 1 o'clock are just nothing. It make really no difference at all. In terms of the existing CUP, one of the requests, I guess, is to modify the existing CUP to remove the anti-banquet or restrictions on the banquet hall use in light of granting a CUP for the banquet hall use, so that the two are consistent. I don't have anything else to say unless you have some questions.
Yeah, I do. I'm kind of concerned with a couple issues. I'm just curious, well, if you've always had a banquet hall, which is what I'm hearing you've always had, then why did you apply for a restaurant? Why you saw originally all the conditions on it that, you have only 30% of the area that could be used for private parties, I'm just curious why you...
In 1996, when the banquet hall use started, there was no 30% rule. The 30% rule came in 2002. By that time, it had already been operating as a banquet hall for 6 years and has a CUP for ZUP. As a restaurant, it's still got the same one it's always had. It's never changed. So it has a ZUP for a restaurant use from 1996. I don't believe that's ever been modified. What's been modified is the conditions on the conditional use permit for alcohol sales.
Was that in 2007 or was that in 2004?
They've always had a CUP for alcohol sales since 1997 also. I think there were no conditions in 97. There were some conditions in 2000. There were no conditions in 2003. There were some conditions in 2005, and then more conditions in 2007 was the way that wound up working. Something like that. I don't remember the exact history.
But in all this time, when you came in for those other CUPs, you just never changed it and said, no, we're now you've changed your definition. We're now a banquet hall. You never...
The CUP for alcohol has nothing to do with the use. It has to do with sales at an existing use. And the existing use had always existed. What they didn't notice was in one of the CUP conditions for alcohol sales, the city put a restriction on banquet hall use. Shall not be used exclusively as a banquet hall. Okay. They had other conditions before that indicating they could be a banquet hall and they simply had to have security there when there were events. On a renewal of a CUP, they changed the conditions. Well, like most people, I think, you get the thing that says grooved, you put it in the drawer. You don't read the conditions, because why should they have changed over the last time you had a CUP? They didn't read the changed conditions, and the city did nothing to enforce it in between. The city's never begun to act to enforce the anti-banquet restrictions until recently. That's what brought the thing to a head. What brought the thing to a head in 2007 was the CUP was granted with a restriction to incidental banquet hall use, whatever that means. James Starbird appealed it. There was a more formal restriction, no banquet hall use put in there. We appealed that to the city council. City council put in the same condition. We took it to court, lost in court, and now it's up on appeal. So that's how it got to a head. And the city has a series of writings. In fact, they've got I believe they've got a book from 2005 indicating that Ambrosia is a banquet hall. That's all it is. And they knew that in 2005, but never moved to stop it because it's grandfathered in. In fact, it is our position that if we give up the alcohol license, there can be no restriction upon the restaurant operating as a banquet hall because it's been there since 1996 in the same condition. It is only what we're here to save is not so much the ability to be a banquet hall, but the ability to serve alcohol at that banquet hall. Because if we give up the alcohol license, we wouldn't need a conditional use permit for the banquet hall use because we're grandfathered in. But to get past the problem and resolve it with the city, we decided to go this route. This is what we agreed to do, and we've been following through on it. But that's why it's a little more tangled than it might appear. It's our position that because the restaurant's got a zoning use certificate as a full-service restaurant granted in 1996, and it's had it ever since, the banquet hall use is grandfathered. But the city takes a different view because it has put restrictions in the CUP for alcohol sales.
Okay. And did you ever have an agreement, now onto the parking reduction permit, did you ever have an agreement with any of the surrounding owners to use their property for parking for your facility?
No, there's never been a covenant
With anybody?
with anybody. And
Okay.
yeah,
'Cause-
well, we just simply note that, I mean, you can see the B of A lot.
Yeah, they can't hear you over there.
This over
If you'd
here?
like to come up here, just make sure you don't touch the screen, otherwise it'll change the screen on you.
It'll reformat me for me, huh?
Exactly.
Okay. This is B of A's lot. Sorry,
Right.
right there. This is all B of A's lot. If you look at it, depending on when this photograph was taken, and I can't tell, although in fact it was daytime, I can't tell whether this is the Bank of America here. This is the sausage place. I can't tell whether the Bank of America customers or they're people from the apartment building or what. What I know is they're not Ambrosia customers because they've got lots of parking spaces. In fact, this could be Bank of America customers. It's one of those situations where Bank of America doesn't use the lot after 1 o'clock on Saturdays and doesn't use it after 6 o'clock on weekdays, and that's basically the beginning of a banquet hall trade. So they've never complained. But they also never complained about the apartment tenants using it. We don't have to use it. If they roped it off tomorrow, or we'll rip it off at night tomorrow morning, or tomorrow night, is our position there's still more than adequate parking for the banquet hall because we've got 38 spaces. Reasonably, you might need as many as 60, so it might be 22 short at full capacity. And there's more than 22 spaces on the street right in front of it. There's more than 10 spaces per each side of San Fernando Boulevard. So there isn't any problem with parking, and never has been. Like I said, that's been laid out or proven out over the last 14 years of operation.
Well, in your own study, though, you say that you admit that you're basically using your neighbor's parking in the evenings for your parties as overflow, essentially from your property, as well as San Fernando Road, right? Because when I went out there, even on your property, all the property owners seem to have signs that state that the parking is just for the business that owns the property, and that other unauthorized users could be towed at any time. And I'm just clarifying that. Even on your own study, noted that it looks like, yeah, people were parking around the area, not necessarily all in Ambrosia's lot, but also there's some spillover on the street, and then also in the other private parking areas. Correct?
As I said, people are going to park wherever is most convenient to them. What the concern has been was whether or not people are going to park on the residential streets. They don't, because it's further away from the business than parking on San Fernando.
Now, it says that you have a security guard out there during some events, and it was even noted that one of them was a sheriff's.
The night I was there, yes.
What purpose does the security guard, are they directing them to use Ambrosia parking, or what purpose do they serve?
Typically, there's a valet there when there's large events. There wasn't that one night, which actually made it a rather good night to go out and observe. No, the security guard is just to keep security. He walks outside, he protects people's cars, he walks inside. Just, reason you have marked police cars isn't because you need the police cars to be marked, it's because people know the police presence.
Okay, but he's not directing people to park on the site or anything like that's not part of his responsibilities.
Well, he will keep people from parking in the neighbors' lots. Really, the only neighbor lot that would have any impact would be the Thai restaurant to the immediate west. Otherwise, there's That's the only neighborhood that has any parking. The sausage place doesn't, and Bank of America doesn't care. So he would keep people out of the Thai restaurant's parking lot, but otherwise, he doesn't particularly direct them. But he didn't have to. The night I was there were spaces available all night in the lot, in Ambrosia's lot. So
So have you tried to get an agreement for parking with Ambrosia or any of your neighbors who don't have a business operating in the evening that would conflict with yours? Have you tried to add additional parking?
No.
Legitimately?
Well, no, and probably for the reason that if you went, I don't know who owns the B of A lot. I don't know if it's owned by Bank of America or owned and leased to them. They don't seem to mind. It's one of the situations where there's just no reason. They know about it, but there's no reason to bring it up to them and maybe stir up something you don't need to stir up. Okay. He said if they roped it off the next day, there would still be more than adequate parking in the area to cover Ambrosia, even at its fullest. And the night I was there, not only were the people not parking on Roberta or Sonora, there were spaces on those streets. So there were enough spaces for the tenants as well. Parking just doesn't seem to be a problem. And that's the night I was there was the worst it could ever be, because it was a night when the valet was supposed to show up and didn't. And it was a full event. So it would never be any worse than it was that night.
Unless maybe one of the neighbors also has a party.
None of the neighbors have a way to have a party. I mean, if you look at the other uses on that side of the street, there's a Bank of America, which doesn't host parties. The sausage place, which doesn't even have any eating areas, it's takeout only. It's like a meat counter. The Thai restaurant, which is relatively small, at least in comparison to Ambrosia, and the liquor store, which has its own parking lot in front, which again wouldn't have events. And most of the area isn't. There aren't a lot of restaurants in the area. There's a few
Yeah,
coffee
but you also
shops.
have a bunch of residents in the area, too, who you're telling me, and clearly by the photo, they also appear to perhaps use that same parking area that you use as over your overflow. Apparently, that's the whole neighborhood that is using that same lot.
Certainly seems to be. Like when I got there that night, there were people parked at the corners of it, which would not have been for Ambrosia. They would have been for the apartment buildings.
Okay. And then, what other uses do you have going on? I'm just want to get all the uses out that you actually have on the property. So I'm hearing that you have a banquet hall use. Clearly, you could have a restaurant, but you say it's never been used as a restaurant. And they also have a commercial kitchen. Am I understanding that's correctly?
It's the same kitchen, cooks for both. They sell food to other businesses, and they do takeout.
Okay. So they'll do food for caterers, say, for catered events.
Yeah.
So they do professional food preparation.
Yes, they're fairly large commercial kitchen.
How long have they been doing that? Has that been going on since they've been a restaurant, or?
How long have they been selling food to the outside?
12 years?
I think they do a couple adult daycare centers and senior citizen centers.
Okay. And then, when did the use change? Was the use always been the entire building, and then part of it was used as a separate? Because I know in the earlier, I guess it was in the 2007 plan, it shows that it was a different use, a sandwich shop, and then now it's the whole thing. I mean, when did that change in the size of the space occur for your restaurant?
I don't think there's been a sandwich.
So 1998, okay, so 1998, that's when your facility opened, okay.
Well, that's when they expanded the kitchen and stopped using the sandwich space for any kind of sandwich space. So I'll just use it as a kitchen for the other portion of the property.
Okay. And then you said when you guys agreed, I'm assuming you agreed to the earlier conditions at one time, somebody agreed to them because you didn't appeal it, to actually perform the conditions of approval. Those two items, I guess it's actually three, that are now included as conditions 8, 9, and 10. Are you saying you're in disagreement with those?
Well, actually, what happened was that they were placed in the conditions for the conditional use permit, and we appealed the entire thing, and that's what's on the main contention is the restriction on the banquet hall use, but it's not the only contention.
Okay, so I'm asking now, are you, for this permit, are you saying you don't agree with 8, 9, and 10, or would you comply with them, or?
What's
If we've-
your 8, 9, and 10? It's the,
Conditions 8, 9, and 10 have to do with the landscaping, the storage.
we would like not to have to take out the trash container and replace it with live vegetation. It's not a very large area. We're talking, 8 feet long and 4 feet wide, 35 square feet, because that might give us some problems in terms of dumping enough trash on weekends. We think it's better having a trash can there. If you insist, we'll turn it back into the vegetation, but I think the city would be happier with it as a garbage, an area for a dumpster, because you can't get trash pickup on weekends. We don't want to have trash piled up around the dumpster. We'd rather have it in the dumpster. But in terms, if you want the enclosure at the northeast corner of the property to be removed, we will do that. We'll comply with the condition. Again, I was going to meet with Ann Mauer and talk to her about that, as whether or not the condition was going to be re-requested, because you've also got a condition in there that wants us to sprinkler it because it's being used for storage. And if you've seen the property, it's not offensive. It simply is metal gated in area with a fine metal mesh painted, match the rest of the metal work on the building. And it keeps people from sleeping underneath there. If we take the metal mesh out, there'll be people sleeping under there again. So it's one of those, there's pluses and minuses. We'll do it whichever way the city wants. We want to get this resolved, but I think the city might want to relook at that, because I think there's more minuses to making us do that than there are pluses.
Well, my concern is if we put it on as a condition of approval, it's been on now for the past 2 years. Is there any, I'm concerned that if we put it on again, is it going to be ignored again? That's my concern.
No, it's not going to be
That's where
ignored
I'm at.
again. But
And then also, I have a question about your parking. The way it's drawn, it's on your plan, that's not what's out there in the field. Do you plan to change it to match this, or do you plan to keep what you have in the field? And I'm not sure of what configuration you're looking to ultimately put in, because it seems like we've had some changing plans. I just want to know which is the one you really want to go with.
My understanding is what is in front of you is what is actually painted there right now.
Yeah.
My instructions to the architect were go do a plan exactly what is out there.
Yeah, that's not like that right now. So that's why,
It's not like that?
no, not at all.
They're introducing actually an angled parking space
And then you,
adjacent to that rear entrance to the building. That's new.
Which angled parking space?
the pointer?
Because if you're pointing to what I'm thinking you're pointing to, that's not a parking space, that's a ramp, isn't it? That's a handicap ramp, I believe.
Well, that's identified as parking
It
number 7.
shows a parking stop, and it says handicap on it.
And currently, there's an existing handicap in this parking stall here, which is abutting the alley, identified as parking number 38. That is shown as a typical parking space on the site plan, but conversely, out in the field, it shows it as a handicap space, which wouldn't meet ADA requirement.
And again, part of the reason I'm asking is because you do show the landscaping in your lot, and now you're telling, looks like there's some concern over that, yet you're showing it on the plan. I just want to make sure we have all the correct facts about this, of what you're really planning to do, because it looks like it might be morphing. And then you also have 2 spaces that are actually completely in a different location. These spaces right here are actually go this way, with a space here to space here. They're not even this direction. So that's why I'm asking. And part of our concern with these is that if they're facing a different direction, do you have adequate backup distance? Also, this space here, I don't think you have the correct width, at least not what I measured last night. So I was curious how you're going to fit all of these in. It's not accurate with what's out there in the field. That's my question. Is this what you're planning to do? If it is,
I wish I could tell
you
you.
have a phone pole or a power pole in this location, so my concern is it really going to work? And is it really accurate? And in the future, when we come back, how do we know that what you say you're going to do is actually what's going to be done? That's where my concern lies. It looks like, you're going to have a restaurant. You applied for a restaurant, then it was a banquet hall. Now you're saying, no, it's always been a banquet hall. We want to make it conforming. Fine. But now your plan doesn't match. So you see where I'm just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all looking at the same plan and have a common understanding of what it is the ultimate goal is.
I can't explain why the parking plan doesn't match. These are not my instructions.
Okay. But that's one of my
Whichever way the
concerns.
city wants it done, we'll get it restriped. It's not that big a deal. Whatever, if they want it like this, they want it some other configuration, we'll work it out.
And then
This is,
one of the other concerns I have with the parking reduction permit that you applied for, because you didn't go for a parking use permit, it's parking reduction, is that to make the finding that your use is different than similar uses. So how would your banquet hall have a different parking requirement than other banquet halls of a similar size? Because what I'm hearing you say is you're a pretty typical banquet hall. You've been in operation as a banquet hall since the 90s. You're going to have a valet parking, but many banquet halls have valet parking. I'm just concerned, how is your parking generation different from some other banquet halls?
first of all, the parking requirement in the code for banquet halls also covers assembly halls. Assembly halls would, depending on how the people get there, would have a different actual parking requirement than a banquet hall would. People come to assembly halls in 1s and 2s, they tend to come to banquet halls in 3s, 4s, and 5s. So in terms of how the structure is actually used as a banquet hall, it would never require 111 spaces. That's what the code, if we complied with the code to start from scratch, it'd be 111 spaces. There would never be more than 75 cars, ever, at this facility. So 111 spaces is absurd because of the way the building's actually used. That might be appropriate for an assembly hall because a 3,000 or 3,900 square foot assembly hall could have 400, 500 people in it. And then 111 spaces makes a lot more sense. We don't have that kind of intensity of use. Our actual use indicates that probably about 55 to 60 spaces would be adequate for the building or for the actual use as it exists. That's what makes us a little bit different than other banquet halls. And as far as I can tell, there aren't that many approved banquet halls in Glendale to have much experience with to determine how many parking spaces they do actually use as compared to assembly halls. But that's what makes us a little different. We've actually measured how many spaces we actually need for the typical use, in fact, for the most intense use, and it is nowhere near what the code requires.
Okay.
The other thing, of course, is it's a grandfathered use. When this building was approved for restaurant use or whatever use the city approves it, as of 96 to 98, it was approved of this number of spaces. I can't change the number of spaces. In fact, I think it's underneath even for a retail establishment. I know the place next door, which is the sausage shop, it's got to require more than 2 spaces, and that's all it has. So everything except perhaps the Bank of America is underspaced,
Okay.
the area.
Okay. And that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you?
No, we'll comply with whatever the city wants in terms of the parking. I had instructed the architect to go out and do exactly what was there and do it scale so that when we came in here, we could show you exactly what was existing. I guess he went out and did it according to what the code requires, or what he thinks the code requires, and not what's existing, which is fine. We'll have it comply with his design. I just wish he'd told me.
Do we have any other comments from staff?
Just related to the parking layout, actually, I also had a conversation with the applicant, and basically what the instructions were to present something that was approvable.
Okay.
So that's probably what took place here, because what's out there now is not approvable today. And that's why I was saying they would require a new building permit to restripe. Currently, what they have there now was never approved in the first place. This is actually slightly more consistent with what we have on file compared to what's out there, those two perpendicular spaces, as you noted earlier, perpendicular to the, actually they would be parallel to the alley and perpendicular to that main
Remainder
row.
of the spaces, yes.
That was never originally approved as it's not reflected in any of the previous plans that were approved. So again, that's why they proposed this site plan, which has not been completely, obviously, plan checked. So there may be still some issues. However, the intent was to submit something that was approvable.
That's fine.
Okay.
It's what she told me.
Okay, and then the commercial kitchen, you plan to, I mean, that's commercial food preparation. And it's, my understanding is that's kind of separate from the banquet facility. You can still have commercial food preparation going on regardless of whether or not you're actually having a banquet. That's correct? Is that my understanding? Yes. All right, because I'm just concerned because food preparation is a light industrial use. And, you know, you've got a commercial zone, like you were saying, for your findings for your conditional use permit, that it's a commercial property for commercial uses. And I didn't even realize that was part of an application or part of your use, because when I looked through your application, that wasn't listed in there at all as an activity that's been going on for 12 years on this facility. So that's why, in fact, I went out there last night and I noticed that what brought to my attention is I went out there last night to just ask people if there was a banquet or what was going on, if that was a separate use. I wasn't sure if it was part of your ambrosia or not. So now you've clarified it. It is part of the site and part of your use, and it's not included in your application. So we'll take a look at that. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or is there anybody else who would like to speak on this item? Yes, you're welcome to come up and you can fill out a speaker's form later before you go.
My name is Levik Beginning. I'm the applicant. I'm running the Ambrosia restaurant last 15 years as a manager. And commercial use, I don't understand what you mean by that. Commercial use.
Commercial food preparation.
That's takeout order. We're serving the food, the adult healthcare centers. We do takeout orders. Usually we take orders for people coming to pick it up too. The same as we doing the delivery for them. Not special commercial, but takeout order. They're ordering the food, lunch and breakfast, and we deliver there.
You deliver food for the caterers. So you told me that earlier today. I'm just clarifying what it is you're doing.
Delivered food to adult healthcare center, not the caterers.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add? Do you have trouble with parking? And if you're there every day,
actually, we don't have a problem with the parking. We do have a valet parking. If we have a 16 parking spaces less during the if you using the valet that's going inside our parking place. If we don't use the other places either, we don't have that much problem with the parking. We did the last 15 years. We didn't have any complaint or anything with the city of the parking on the streets. Most of them. Especially during the day, they are not belong to us. That belong to neighboring businesses, post offices.
Right. I'm only assuming that people are using the other parking when perhaps the other businesses are closed. So, like you're telling me, when you have your parties, is generally when the other businesses in the area are closed.
Yeah, no, most of them close. And at night, sometimes we use a Bank of America parking space after 6 o'clock. Saturday after 2 o'clock, the bank is closed. We don't use parking spaces on the street either.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any further questions. Do you have any? Are there any further comments you'd like to make? No?
I really appreciate we're running as a family business. We're doing this last 15 years, so I really appreciate to prove that as a banquet hall, we always doing the good job. And if you ask the neighbors or police department or some other offices from city of Glendale, we didn't have any problem, no fighting. Last 10 years we didn't have a call from, Ambrosia to police department, we always careful. The door is always closed for noises. Always we have a security guard during the parties.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing no one in the audience with further comments, I will take this item under submission. Thanks. The planning hearing officers meeting. We are adjourned.